I thought the night was supposed to be about me. After all, I had just been promoted to major in the U.S. Army, and my mom insisted on having a family dinner to celebrate. Nothing too fancy, just a sit-down meal at a nice restaurant in San Antonio. My sister Lena somehow turned it into her own show. She booked a big table, invited half the people she knew from her social circle, and strutted around like she was hosting a political fundraiser. When I walked in, I noticed how she made sure to sit at the center spot right next to my mom like she was the guest of honor. I tried to ignore it. I've spent enough years in uniform to know how to keep my emotions off my face. A soldier doesn't blow up in public, but inside, I had a bad feeling. The waiter led me over, and I spotted an open chair beside my mom. I smiled, started walking toward it, and that's when Lena slammed her palm down on the table and raised her voice so everyone in the room could hear. "This table is for the family," she snapped. "Get outside." For a second, I thought she was joking. Who yells something like that in a restaurant, in front of their own mother, friends, and half the neighborhood? But Lena had that look, chin lifted, smug little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, daring me to argue. The chatter in the room stopped cold. Every head turned my way. A couple of my army buddies who'd come to celebrate froze, caught between pretending they didn't hear it and wanting to defend me. Some of Lena's friends giggled like middle school kids watching a cafeteria fight. I just stood there. My first instinct was to remind her that I had earned the right to sit wherever the hell I wanted. But the discipline drilled into me over the years kept me in check. When you've dealt with screaming drill sergeants, angry colonels, and exhausted soldiers ready to quit, you learn not to give people like Lena the satisfaction of watching you lose your cool. Instead, I quietly pulled out the chair and sat down anyway. My mom gave me a weak smile, but she didn't say anything. Her arthritis was bad that week, and the last thing she wanted was to get caught in the middle of one of Lena's performances. Lena glared at me, but with everyone staring, she turned back to her glass of wine, as if she had already won. Dinner dragged on. I could feel eyes on me every time I lifted my fork. Lena kept the spotlight on herself, bragging about how she had managed the entire dinner, how exhausting it was to host, and how grateful Mom should be for everything she did. She tossed in a few digs about how some people don't understand what real responsibility looks like because they're always away at work. It didn't take a genius to know she was talking about me. Then came the kicker. When dessert plates were cleared, the waiter walked over with the check. He didn't put it in front of Lena, who had ordered half the bottles of wine on the bill. He didn't put it in front of her boyfriend Eric, who had spent the evening on his phone pretending he was too busy to notice the tension. No, the waiter placed the leather folder right in front of me. $2,000. The table went silent again, and this time I heard a chuckle from someone at Lena's end. "Well, Major, I guess rank has its privileges," one of her friends said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I didn't move right away. I just looked at the bill, then at Lena. She smirked like she had pulled off the perfect ambush. She wanted me humiliated twice in one night, first excluded from the table, then stuck paying for her little show. I didn't give her the reaction she wanted. Without a word, I slid the folder back across the table toward the waiter. He blinked, glanced at me, then at Lena, and for a moment the whole table froze like someone had hit pause. My silence was louder than anything I could have shouted. That was the point when I felt something shift. I wasn't the one being humiliated anymore. Lena thought she'd embarrassed me in front of everyone, but what she really did was expose herself. People who barely knew us now saw her for what she was: loud, controlling, and desperate for attention. I sat back, folded my hands, and let the tension hang in the air. The waiter, clearly uncomfortable, turned and set the bill down right in front of Lena. Her face flushed red, and Eric finally looked up from his phone, realizing he might actually be expected to do something. I didn't need to say a thing. Sometimes silence is sharper than any comeback. The rest of the dinner was stiff, awkward, and painfully quiet. People went back to picking at their food, laughing too hard at small jokes, trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a family crack open in public. My army buddies gave me side-eye, the kind that says, "You good?" without words. I gave a small nod. I wasn't good, but I wasn't broken either. Walking out of that restaurant later, I kept my face steady. Years of military training had taught me how to march through storms without blinking, but inside I was boiling. The humiliation stung, Not because of the crowd, not even because of the money, but because it came from my own sister. That night marked the line in the sand. Lena wanted to make it clear that I didn't belong at the family table. Fine. If she wanted to treat me like an outsider, she'd learn exactly what that meant when I stopped playing by her rules. The drive home that night was quiet except for the buzzing in my head. Every mile I put between me and that restaurant, the heavier the silence felt. By the time I walked into Mom's house, I wasn't even hungry anymore. The humiliation had burned right through my appetite, and all that was left was a knot in my stomach. Mom shuffled into the kitchen with her slippers, asking softly if I wanted tea. She always did that after arguments, like tea could somehow undo the poison Lena spread. I told her no, and leaned against the counter, arms crossed, trying to stop my jaw from clenching. She didn't say Lena's name, but we both knew that's what she was thinking about. It wasn't like Lena suddenly turned into this person. She'd been building to it for years, little by little, always pushing boundaries. Growing up, she had a way of making everything hers. Toys, friends, even attention at school if Lena wanted it, she claimed it, and if you got in her way, she'd make you regret it. Back then, I thought it was just normal sibling rivalry. I figured she'd outgrow it. Instead, she refined it. Dad used to be the referee. He was quiet, steady, the type who never raised his voice but always knew how to shut an argument down with just a look. After he passed, things shifted fast. Lena stepped in like she was the new head of the household, and Mom was too tired and too grief-stricken to challenge it. I was already enlisted, bouncing between training cycles and deployments, so Lena's grip tightened while I was gone. When I did come back home for short stints, the house felt different. Mom tiptoed around her own kitchen. Mail that used to be stacked on the hall table now disappeared into Lena's room. Bills came later, not at all, and whenever I asked about them, Lena waved me off with some smart comment like, "Don't worry about it, soldier. We've got it handled here." Or pan it. One night, a few years back, I tried to pay the electric bill online and found out the login didn't work anymore. Lena had changed all the accounts to make it easier. I let it go because I was getting ready to deploy again. I told myself she was helping, stepping up for Mom while I was away. That's how manipulation works, it hides behind convenience. I kept pushing it aside, focusing on my job. Serving meant I wasn't around for family dinners or PTA-style gossip sessions, so I wasn't there to see the daily digs Lena dropped on Mom. I wasn't there to see how she turned neighbors into her personal audience, bragging about how she was basically running two households, her own mess of a life with Eric and Mom's. By the time I did hear about it, it was already too late to stop the pattern. Mom once confessed to me over coffee that she felt like a guest in her own house. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but I couldn't deny what I saw every time I walked through the door. Lena holding the remote. Lena telling her which doctor's appointments she should cancel because it's too expensive. Lena deciding who came over and when. It wasn't caring, it was control, dressed up as responsibility. And the crazy part? Mom defended her most of the time. She said things like, "She's trying her best," or "She's just under pressure." That night after the restaurant, she even muttered, "Your sister means well. She just has a temper." I almost laughed. A temper doesn't make someone throw their own flesh and blood out of a family dinner. That's not heat of the moment anger. That's deliberate. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the fridge door covered in magnets from my duty stations. Germany, Korea, Fort Hood. Each one was a reminder of where I'd been and what I'd missed while Lena tightened her grip back home. It was more than jealousy. She didn't just resent that I had a career, a paycheck, and a sense of direction. She resented that I left and came back stronger every time. In her mind, she was the one holding things together. But in reality, she was just rearranging pieces to suit herself. Mom had always been the reason I stayed quiet. As long as she wasn't in danger, I figured I could handle the jabs, the eye rolls, the passive-aggressive comments. But the look on her face at the restaurant told me she wasn't just embarrassed for me. She was scared of Lena's anger turning on her. That hit harder than anything Lena could say to my face. Eric didn't help either. He was the type of guy who always had a scheme. He'd show up with half-baked business ideas, always just about to take off, but somehow never making rent on time. I overheard him once talking about using Mom's house as collateral for something, and when I confronted him, he laughed it off like I was paranoid. That laugh stuck with me, though. It wasn't the laugh of someone who was joking. It was the laugh of someone who thought he'd already won. I realized Lena had been rehearsing that restaurant stunt for years. Every eye roll, every bill she hid, every time she reminded Mom that I wasn't around, those were dress rehearsals for the moment she could finally shove me out in public and claim the stage for herself. Standing in that kitchen with Mom, I promised myself one thing. Lena might control the house while I was gone, but she wasn't going to control me, not anymore. The first real crack showed up a few weeks later when Mom handed me a letter she didn't understand. It was from the bank. Thick envelope, official stamp across the top. She slid it across the kitchen table like it was something toxic. Her voice was quiet when she asked, "Can you read this for me?" The letter was about a late payment on a line of credit. I frowned because I knew Mom didn't have a line of credit. Her only accounts were her checking and savings, the ones she barely touched except for groceries and prescriptions. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. It was clear. Someone had opened a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, using her house as collateral. The balance was already over $100,000. I looked up at her. She was wringing her hands, waiting for me to explain. My first thought was maybe it was a mistake, some kind of paperwork error, but the pit in my stomach told me it wasn't. "Did you sign anything with the bank recently?" I asked. Mom shook her head so fast I knew she was telling the truth. Lena walked in just then, all casual with her coffee mug, like she didn't hear the tension filling the room. She spotted the letter on the table and her smile froze for just a second before she covered it with a sip of coffee. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand. "I took care of it. No big deal." "No big deal?" I almost laughed. 6 figures tied to Mom's house wasn't exactly pocket change. I asked her how she took care of it, and she launched into a rehearsed spiel about how she had power of attorney, how she used it to restructure finances, so Mom could be more comfortable. She made it sound like she had done everyone a favor. Mom's face went pale, like she only then realized what power of attorney really meant in Lena's hands. I remembered signing the papers with her a couple years ago, back when I was preparing for deployment. It seemed practical at the time. If anything happened to me, Lena could help Mom handle things. I never thought she'd use it to gamble with Mom's house. I didn't explode right there. Military training teaches you how to control your face even when you want to rip the walls down. I kept my voice steady, asked her what she did with the money. She smiled that smug smile she's perfected since childhood and said it was invested. I asked in what. She muttered something about an LLC, a family venture, and told me not to worry about details I wouldn't understand. That's when my hands started shaking under the table. Not from fear, from restraint. Every instinct in me screamed to call her bluff, to demand receipts, but I knew yelling wouldn't get me the truth. So I just nodded and said, I'd look into it myself. Over the next few days, I started digging. I pulled Mom's mail before Lena could snatch it, opened every envelope, combed through every notice. What I found was worse than I expected. Not just the HELOC, but late fees, overdraft charges, insurance policies being switched around without Mom's knowledge. All of it tied back to Lena's signature under the power of attorney. Mom asked me quietly one night if we were in danger of losing the house. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I just squeezed her hand and told her I'd handle it. Inside, though, I was boiling. The house wasn't just property, it was the last piece of Dad. He built that back porch with his own hands, fixed the roof himself every time it leaked. Losing it because Lena decided to play banker? Unthinkable. One afternoon, I caught Eric in the driveway, talking too loudly on his phone. He was bragging about a cash infusion and how their business was about to explode. I stayed out of sight until he hung up, then asked him directly if he was talking about the HELOC money. He gave me that greasy grin and said, "It's all under control, Major. Don't sweat it." Hearing my rank come out of his mouth like a punchline made my skin crawl. I realized then it wasn't just Lena. She and Eric were a team, and Mom's house was their piggy bank. I took the next step the way I'd approach a mission. Carefully, with evidence. I requested copies of all the bank paperwork. It took some convincing, but when I showed the bank manager my ID and explained I was Mom's daughter, and also on the POA file, he finally pulled them up. Sure enough, Lena's name was everywhere. She'd opened the HELOC 6 months earlier, drawn out $120,000, and funneled it through a shell LLC registered to her and Eric. The LLC had some generic name like Monroe Ventures. Nothing that actually meant anything. No real business, no employees, no product, just a mailbox address at a strip mall and a checking account bleeding money. I drove home with the copies stacked on the passenger seat, my jaw clenched so tight I gave myself a headache. Lena and Eric weren't just irresponsible. They were stealing. From Mom. From me. From the family. That night, I watched Mom sleep in her recliner, soft snore, blanket slipping off her shoulders. She trusted us to take care of her, and here we were, one daughter robbing her blind, the other scrambling to patch holes in a sinking ship. I felt ashamed for ever signing that POA, ashamed I hadn't questioned sooner. But shame wasn't going to save the house. Evidence would. The next morning, I told Mom I was going to run errands, and instead met with a lawyer I knew from my reserve unit, Captain Whitaker. Sharp. No nonsense. The kind of officer who never sugarcoated a thing. I showed him the bank papers. He didn't even blink before saying, "This is elder financial abuse, clear as day." Hearing those words made the situation real in a way it hadn't been before. Abuse. Not bad judgment. Not a family spat abuse. Whitaker said I had two choices. Confront Lena directly or start building a legal case that would stand up in court. He recommended the latter. Quiet investigation, document everything, get witnesses if possible. Walking out of his office, I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. Lena had crossed into criminal territory, and Eric, with his constant business deals, was dragging her deeper. By the time I pulled back into Mom's driveway, Lena's car was already there. I saw her silhouette in the living room window, pacing, phone pressed to her ear. She was probably spinning another one of her stories. For once, though, I didn't feel cornered. I felt focused. I decided to act like I believed Lena's excuses while I moved forward quietly. Pretending to buy her family venture story gave me time to put real pressure where it mattered evidence. That's when I called a private investigator. His name was Samir Patel, a former cop who'd traded night shifts for stakeouts with a camera. He worked out of a cramped office above a pawn shop, the kind of place you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. Samir had seen his share of family messes, but once I laid the paperwork on his desk, his eyebrows shot up. "This isn't sloppy bookkeeping," he said, flipping through the copies of the HELOC withdrawal slips. "This is structured. She's funneling money through an LLC, and that's intentional." I explained the power of attorney, the fact that Lena had legal access. He nodded slowly. "Legal access doesn't mean moral or smart. What she's doing fits the pattern of elder financial abuse. You'll need more than paperwork. You'll need to show intent." So we set up a plan. Samir would track where the money went, follow Lena and Eric when they made their so-called business runs, and gather photographic proof. I didn't like spying on my own sister, but the thought of losing Mom's house made my stomach churn harder than any sense of family loyalty. The first week of surveillance didn't take long to pay off. Samir called me late one night, his voice steady but urgent. "I got them," he said. "Your sister and her boyfriend just walked out of a bank downtown. They wired 20 grand to an offshore account." He sent photos straight to my phone. Lena in a blazer she definitely couldn't afford. Eric holding paperwork, both looking smug. Seeing those photos made my hands shake again. Not with restraint this time, but with pure anger. It wasn't just carelessness, they were laundering money like professionals. Samir kept digging. Within days, he traced the LLC to nothing more than a rented mailbox and a bank account that bled money into Eric's personal expenses, casino charges, car payments, and dinners at restaurants Mom hadn't stepped foot in since Dad died. Each receipt was another nail in the coffin of Lena's family venture. Meanwhile, I kept up the act at home. Lena bragged about how she was building something big, and how one day I'd thank her for securing our future. I bit my tongue and nodded, memorizing every word, every slip she made about investors or capital. Mom just looked confused most of the time, asking me quietly if everything was okay. I told her I had it under control, though inside I was counting the days before Lena did something irreversible. Then came the moment that sealed it. Samir called with a recording. In our state, one-party consent meant I could legally record conversations as long as one person knew. He'd managed to catch Lena and Eric talking outside a bar. On the tape, Lena laughed about how easy it had been to use Mom's trust to get the bank loan. Eric joked that Mom would be in a nursing home before she ever figured it out. I listened to that recording 3 times, jaw locked. Hearing my own sister laugh about throwing Mom into a nursing home like she was disposable, it lit something in me I couldn't turn off. Samir didn't stop there. He pulled property records and found out they'd tried to use Mom's credit to secure a lease on a second house for investment purposes. The application was denied, but the attempt was in black and white. It was clear. Lena and Eric weren't dabbling. They were actively scheming, and Mom was their golden goose. I went back to Captain Whitaker with the new evidence. He skimmed the file, eyes narrowing. This isn't just bad behavior anymore. This is fraud. Abuse of POA. Possible wire fraud depending on how far the money traveled. His advice was the same. Build everything piece by piece, airtight. Courts don't deal in emotions, they deal in proof. I felt like I was living 2 lives by day. The dutiful daughter eating dinner with Mom and nodding at Lena's fake smiles, and by night, the soldier collecting intel, prepping for a confrontation that would hit harder than anything I'd faced in uniform. But even with all the evidence, one thing kept nagging me. Lena was clever enough to know when lines were being crossed. Why risk leaving so many trails? The answer came when Samir dug deeper into Eric. Turns out he had a record 2 counts of securities fraud from a few years back. Both pled down to misdemeanors. That's when it clicked. Eric wasn't just the boyfriend, he was the architect. He knew the system, knew how to stretch POA authority to the edge, and Lena was the willing accomplice. The worst part was knowing Mom had no idea. She still saw Lena as the responsible one, the daughter who helped with the bills while I was away serving. If I dropped the bomb without airtight proof, Lena would twist it, spin the story until Mom doubted me. I'd seen her do it before, make herself the victim, paint me as the bossy soldier who didn't understand how hard real life was. Samir suggested we go a step further, document Lena's interactions with Mom. If she pressures your mom, even casually, it shows a pattern, he said. So we placed a discreet camera in the living room, angled at the couch where Lena usually cornered Mom with important papers. It didn't take long. Within a week, the footage showed Lena pushing Mom to sign documents without explaining them, brushing off Mom's questions, snapping at her when she hesitated. That video was the tipping point for me. Watching Mom shrink back while Lena shoved papers under her nose was worse than seeing any bank record. It wasn't just financial anymore, it was personal, emotional. She wasn't just stealing money, she was stripping Mom of dignity. I spent that night in the garage, pacing between the boxes of Dad's old tools, clenching and unclenching my fists. Every mission I'd ever run had rules of engagement, but this wasn't a battlefield with clear lines. This was family. And family doesn't get an easy set of rules. The next morning, Lena strutted into the kitchen, acting like nothing was wrong, talking about some business dinner she and Eric had lined up. I poured my coffee, nodded, and said nothing. Inside, though, the plan was already taking shape. I wasn't going to let Mom lose everything Dad built, and I wasn't going to let Lena and Eric laugh their way to the bank with money that didn't belong to them. The first hint that Lena sensed I was onto her came one Saturday afternoon when I stopped by Mom's to drop off groceries. As soon as I walked in, I noticed 2 of our cousins, Mark and Jenny, sitting in the living room. They looked uncomfortable, cups of untouched coffee in their hands. Lena was standing like a ringmaster in the middle of the room, telling some dramatic story. The second she spotted me, her tone shifted, but the tension hung in the air like smoke. Jenny gave me a tight smile. Mark avoided my eyes. Mom sat in her recliner, lips pressed together, clearly stuck in the crossfire. I asked what was going on, and Lena jumped in before anyone else could answer. "Oh, just filling them in," she said sweetly. "They were worried about Mom, so I explained how you've been trying to take control of everything." I froze. "Come again?" Lena crossed her arms, tilting her head in that smug way she had since childhood. "Don't play dumb. You've been sneaking around, questioning Mom's decisions, acting like she can't manage her own life. I told them how you've been pushing her to sign things she doesn't even understand." I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was. She was describing her own behavior word for word, projecting it onto me. And of course, she did it in front of family, so I'd look defensive if I denied it. Classic Lena. Mark finally looked at me and muttered, She made it sound like you're planning to put Aunt Ellen in a nursing home. That hit me square in the chest. The same nursing home threat she'd laughed about with Eric was now twisted around and pinned on me. I set the grocery bags down carefully, keeping my voice calm. That's not true. You know me better than that. But Lena pounced before my words could land. See? She's always so controlling. Always acting like she's the only one who knows what's best. It's exhausting. Mom tried to cut in with a quiet, "Girls, please." But Lena steamrolled right over her. The cousins didn't stay long after that, but the damage was done. I saw the doubt flicker in their faces as they left. That was Lena's real power, not just stealing money, but stealing trust. She knew if she could isolate me, make me look like the unstable one, then any evidence I gathered would be tainted by suspicion. The smear campaign didn't stop there. A week later, I got a call from one of Mom's old church friends. She asked gently if it was true I'd been pressuring Mom to sell the house. I felt my blood pressure spike. Lena was spreading her story beyond family now, planting seeds in the community. The timing wasn't random. Samir's investigation was producing more evidence every day, and Lena must have sensed the walls closing in. Eric added fuel to the fire. He cornered me in the driveway one evening, leaning against his beat-up car with that cocky grin. "You really think you're smarter than us, Major? Word gets around. People are already talking. Who do you think they'll believe, the daughter who's always gone, or the sister who's been here every day?" I stepped closer, close enough for him to drop the grin. "I don't need people to believe me," I said. "I've got facts. And facts don't care about your little stories." For once, he didn't have a comeback. He just sneered and muttered something about sticking together as family, which coming from him was laughable. At home, Mom grew more withdrawn. She started asking me strange questions, like whether I really thought she couldn't handle her own money, or if I was planning to move her out. I reassured her again and again, but I could see the doubt Lena was planting had already taken root. It was cruel watching Mom torn between two daughters, one feeding her lies, the other trying to protect her without making her feel powerless. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to find Lena sitting at the table with a stack of papers spread out in front of Mom. Mom looked overwhelmed, pen in hand, while Lena pointed to signature lines. My chest tightened. I stepped forward and asked what she was doing. Lena didn't even flinch. "Just updating some things. Don't worry. It's nothing you'd understand." I snapped back. "Then explain it to Mom, out loud, right now." She smirked. "She trusts me. That's all that matters." Mom's hand shook as she set the pen down. Her eyes darted between us, desperate not to choose sides. That moment gutted me. Lena had trapped her sign and risk everything, or refuse and ignite another battle. I pulled the papers away, ignoring Lena's screech, and stuffed them into my bag. Mom whispered my name, half scared, half relieved. Lena exploded. She accused me of trying to control Mom, of undermining her caregiving. Her voice carried through the house, making sure the neighbors heard. She was staging the show, building her narrative brick by brick. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. "Lena says you're being aggressive. Are you okay?" It stung, not because Jenny doubted me, but because Lena was so effective at twisting reality. Samir warned me this would happen. When people like her feel cornered, they go on a fence. They'll play the victim so loud it drowns out the truth. That's why evidence matters. Stay steady. Staying steady was easier said than done. Every time Lena smirked in front of Mom, every time she tossed out a half-truth to friends or cousins, I wanted to drag out the photos, the recordings, the receipts, and shove them in her face. But I knew blowing up too early would give her exactly what she wanted. Proof I was unstable. Meanwhile, Eric started planting his own seeds. I overheard him telling a neighbor that Mom's house was too big for her, and maybe it was time to downsize. The casual way he said it made me sick. Downsizing was code for selling the house, pocketing the difference, and leaving Mom with nothing. I doubled down on gathering evidence. Samir captured more recordings, including Lena complaining that I was milking the army thing to look like the responsible daughter, while she was the one really doing the work. She even bragged that she could convince Mom to sign anything if she framed it as helping Tessa. That one made me laugh bitterly. Imagine using my name as cover while she gutted our family. The lies, the whispers, the fake concern, it all built up like smoke before a fire. And underneath it, I could feel the real blaze waiting to break out. I tightened my laces before heading to drill that weekend, and the ritual felt different this time. Normally, the uniform was a switch. Pull it on, leave family mess behind, focus on the mission. But that morning, Lena's voice followed me out the door. All her accusations, the way she tried to pit Mom and the cousins against me. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a threat. At the armory, I pulled Captain Whitaker aside. He'd already reviewed the file I gave him last time. Now I laid out the newest evidence. Samir's photos, the recordings, the stack of papers Lena shoved under Mom's nose. Whitaker listened without interrupting, the way good officers do. Then he leaned back and said, "You're dealing with two fronts: family loyalty and criminal liability. You'll need to decide if you're handling this as a daughter or as an officer who sees abuse of power." I hated the question because the answer was both. "She's my sister," I said, "but she's also robbing our mother blind." He gave me the kind of look that cuts right through excuses. "Then don't confuse compassion with weakness. You've been trained to gather facts, stay calm under pressure, and confront threats directly. Apply that here." His words settled something inside me. For months, I'd been bouncing between fury and hesitation. Now I realized I needed to treat this the same way I'd treat a mission. Discipline first, emotion later. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Mom while she worked on a crossword. I asked her simple questions: what bills she thought she'd paid, what papers Lena had shown her recently, what she remembered signing. Her answers were vague, foggy, not because she was incapable, but because Lena made sure she stayed confused. That's when I told her the truth, gently but clearly. "Mom, Lena used your power of attorney to borrow money against the house." Her pencil slipped from her hand. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head like she wanted to push the thought away. "No, she wouldn't." I slid one of the bank statements toward her. She already did. Her hands trembled as she scanned the page. "Why would she?" I stopped her before she spiraled into excuses. "Because she could, and because Eric knows how to play the system." For the first time, I saw the crack in Mom's defense of Lena. A mix of disbelief and betrayal passed over her face. She whispered, "I thought she was helping me." I leaned in. "She's helping herself. But I promise you, we're not going to lose this house. Not while I'm standing." The next morning, I called Adult Protective Services. It wasn't a move I wanted to make, but Whitaker had been right. This wasn't just sibling drama, it was elder abuse. The investigator I spoke with listened carefully as I explained. She asked for documentation, and I faxed over copies of everything: bank statements, recordings, even screenshots of Eric's LLC filings. Within days, APS scheduled an official interview with Mom. When Lena found out, she exploded. She cornered me in the driveway, voice shrill, calling me a traitor for dragging the government into family business. I didn't flinch. I just said, "If you wanted to keep the government out, you shouldn't have stolen from your own mother." End quote. She screamed that I was trying to ruin her life. I almost laughed at the irony. She'd done a fine job of that herself. The confrontation shook Mom badly, though. She cried that night, not because of the investigation, but because her daughters were at war. I sat beside her, holding her hand, reminding her this wasn't about sides. "It's about truth," I said, "and truth doesn't pick favorites." Meanwhile, Eric tried a new tactic. He sent me a text that read, "We can work something out. No need to blow this up." I didn't reply. A second text came. "Think about your career. Army doesn't like scandals." That one made my blood run cold. He wasn't just scheming for money anymore, he was threatening my livelihood. I showed the messages to Whitaker, who told me to document everything and keep my chain of command in the loop if it escalated. Military life teaches you to guard your reputation as carefully as your weapon. I wasn't going to let Eric's slime trail touch mine. Samir added another piece to the puzzle. He traced withdrawals from the HELOC directly to casino markers in Eric's name. So not only were they draining Mom's equity, they were gambling it away. I stared at the receipts, thinking of Dad's hands sanding the porch rail, every nail he hammered into that house. They'd turned his work into poker chips. Still, I kept my cool in front of them. When Lena bragged at Sunday dinner about her business growing, I smiled and asked what their profit margin was. She stammered. Eric jumped in with some nonsense about early-stage investments. I pretended to be impressed while mentally filing away every detail for the case. The balance was hard being daughter, soldier, investigator all at once. But discipline kept me steady. I woke up each morning, laced my boots, and reminded myself, facts over feelings. Lena thrived on chaos, but I thrived on order, and order was exactly what would bring her down. I didn't tell Mom everything. I spared her the worst of the details, Eric's record, the offshore accounts, the casino trips. She didn't need that weight. What she needed was assurance, and I gave it to her every day. You're not losing your home. Not to them. One evening after drill, I stopped by Whitaker's office again. He spread all the evidence out across his desk, lining it up like pieces of a battle map. You've got more than enough to prove abuse, he said. Next step is timing. You want to make the confrontation public enough that she can't spin it, but safe enough that your mom doesn't collapse under the pressure. I nodded, already picturing the opportunity. Lena loved attention. She thrived on being the star at family gatherings. If there was ever a moment to pull the mask off, it would be then. As I left his office, I realized something had shifted in me. For months I'd been reacting, dodging Lena's lies, patching holes she left behind. Now, I was planning. Discipline had replaced fury. Strategy had replaced panic. I was no longer just the sister fighting back. I was the soldier leading the operation. I couldn't shake the feeling that Eric was the one pulling the strings. Lena had always been manipulative, but she didn't have the brains for shell companies, offshore accounts, or wire transfers. That kind of operation needed someone who'd already danced close to the law. And Eric fit that role a little too perfectly. Samir called me one evening with a new update. Your sister's boyfriend is dirty, he said flatly. I pulled court records out of Nevada. 2 counts of securities fraud from 2016. He pled down, but he lost his license to ever work in finance again. Then, I gripped the phone tighter. So he was banned from finance, and now he's managing an LLC? Samir chuckled bitterly. Managing is a nice word. He's laundering your mom's money through that LLC. And he's smart enough to keep Lena's name front and center, so if the whole thing blows up, she takes the first hit. Hearing that stung, not because I wanted to protect Lena, but because I could see exactly how Eric used her. She thought they were partners. In reality, she was his shield. Later that week, I spotted Eric's car outside the house when I came by after drill. He was on the porch, leaning against the railing like he owned the place. When I stepped out of my truck, he smirked. Busy day, Major? He asked, dragging out the rank like it was a joke. I didn't answer. I just walked past him, but he wasn't done. Funny thing, he said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Word is, you've got a temper problem. Dangerous mix with military folks. People might start wondering if you're stable. I froze mid-step. That was his play. If they couldn't bury me with lies about Mom, they'd smear me personally, drag my career into it. I turned slowly. Careful, Eric, I said. You're not the first punk who thought threats made him look powerful. They just make you look desperate. His grin faltered for a second before snapping back. We'll see who's desperate when this all shakes out. Inside, Mom was anxious, wringing her hands. He said the neighbors think you're trying to get me put away, she whispered. My chest tightened. Eric was poisoning every circle we had, drip by drip. That night, I asked Samir to dig deeper, not just financials, but associates, addresses, everything. 2 days later, he handed me a folder thick enough to choke on. Inside were property records, old arrest reports, even a bankruptcy tied to a scam business Eric ran in Arizona. Buried in the stack was something worse. A restraining order filed by a former girlfriend who accused him of intimidation and threats. I read every page twice, my jaw locked. This wasn't just sleazy business. Eric was dangerous. Meanwhile, Lena was doubling down. She started showing up at family gatherings I wasn't even at, spinning her version of the story to anyone who'd listen. According to her, I was jealous of her success, paranoid about Eric, and trying to tear the family apart because I couldn't stand not being in control. It was a perfect script, half-truths wrapped in emotional language, delivered with crocodile tears. One evening, Mom's neighbor stopped me as I was unloading groceries. She lowered her voice and said, Honey, your sister told me you were trying to sell your mom's house out from under her. Is that true? I almost dropped the milk. The lie wasn't just spreading, it was becoming the narrative. I forced myself to smile and said calmly, No, that's not true. I'm the one keeping the house safe. But inside, the anger was boiling. Samir gave me another bombshell a week later. They tried to spearfish your TSP account. I blinked. My what? Your thrift savings plan, retirement. Someone sent a spoof email pretending to be TSP support, asking for login credentials. They timed it right after a drill weekend, probably thinking you'd be too busy to notice. I felt the blood drain from my face. You're saying Eric tried to hack my military retirement? Samir didn't hesitate. The timing, the IP address, the fact that it was routed through one of his known addresses, it all points to him. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They weren't satisfied draining Mom. They wanted me too. When I told Whitaker, he was stone-faced. That's federal. If you can tie it back to him, that's not family drama anymore, that's prison time. I realized then that Eric's arrogance wasn't just greed. He thought he was untouchable. He thought Lena's family shield, plus his manipulative charm, would keep the law at bay. At home, I started locking my bedroom door again, something I hadn't done since high school. Mom noticed, and it broke my heart when she asked if I was afraid of my own sister. I didn't answer. The truth would only make her cry harder. Meanwhile, Eric tried to cozy up to Mom, acting like the dutiful boyfriend. He'd show up with groceries, mow the lawn, even fix a leaky faucet. But Samir's photos told the truth. An hour after helping, Eric was at the casino, blowing money that didn't belong to him. The manipulation was constant, suffocating. Lena played the loyal daughter, Eric played the supportive partner, and together they painted me as the villain. But every smear, every lie, every failed phishing attempt only made me more determined. One night, I sat at the kitchen table, Dad's old hammer lying across from me like a reminder. He built this house with sweat and patience. He taught us better than this. I whispered to myself, not one more dollar, not one more signature, not one more lie. The evidence pile was thick. The APS file was open. And Eric's past, ugly and undeniable, was finally on the record. He wasn't just a shady boyfriend anymore, he was a threat to everything my family had left. I started spending late nights at the dining room table, spreading papers across the surface like maps before a battle. Bank records on one side, Samir's photos on the other, and in the middle, a stack of documents from APS that confirmed what Whitaker already told me. This wasn't just ugly family drama, it was legally defined elder abuse. Every page felt heavier than the last. Samir came by with a flash drive one evening. Everything we've got is backed up here. Audio, video, financials. If she tries to cry her way out, this shuts it down. He set it down next to Dad's old hammer, the one I'd left on the table as a reminder of what was at stake. But timing's going to matter. You can't spring this in some back hallway. You need an audience so she can't rewrite the story later. He was right. Lena lived off perception. She didn't care if the truth was against her, as long as people believed her side louder. The only way to break her grip was to pull the curtain back in front of everyone who'd been swallowing her lies. That's when the idea formed, the memorial dinner for Dad. Every year we gathered at the house to honor him, extended family, neighbors, even some of Dad's old buddies from the plant. Lena always treated it like her stage, basking in sympathy while talking about how much she sacrificed to care for Mom. It was the perfect setup. This year, the spotlight would turn. I looped in Whitaker and a civilian attorney named Judith Park, someone he trusted for cases involving POA abuse. Judith looked over the file and gave a tight nod. It's clean. You've got recordings, financial trails, and testimony potential. What you need now is control of the room. End quote. Control of the room, I knew that phrase well. It was the same principle as leading a briefing. If you didn't command the space, you lost it. I started planning the dinner like an operation. Who would sit where, when I'd reveal each piece of evidence, and how to keep Mom shielded while still present. Mom was hesitant when I floated the idea. Do we really have to bring this up at a family dinner? She asked softly. I squeezed her hand. Mom, this isn't about embarrassing anyone. It's about ending it, once and for all. Meanwhile, Lena and Eric had no clue. They went on as if nothing was coming. Lena bragging about her business contacts, Eric strutting around like he owned the driveway. They were so confident in their web of lies they didn't notice the walls closing in. In the days leading up to the dinner, Samir added one last layer of insurance. He followed Eric to another meeting at a strip mall office and caught him on camera handing over an envelope of cash. Cross-checking the timing with bank withdrawals, it was obvious. He was moving HELOC money through middlemen to dodge scrutiny. The video went straight into the evidence file. The night before the dinner, I rehearsed my words in the mirror, not to dramatize but to keep steady. I wasn't going to scream or cry. Lena thrived on chaos, and Eric thrived on intimidation. My job was to stay calm, to let the evidence speak louder than either of them. I also prepared the tech. Samir loaned me a small projector, and Judith arranged a simple slideshow of key documents, clear, undeniable, certified copies. No one could accuse me of tampering or exaggerating. Every detail had a timestamp and source. I slept barely 3 hours that night. When I woke, the weight in my chest wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. The day of the dinner, Lena showed up early in a new dress, all smiles, acting like she was hosting instead of mom. She ordered people around the kitchen, told the cousins where to sit, and paraded trays of food she hadn't cooked. I watched her play the role, all sweetness to the guests, poison in private. Eric arrived later, carrying a bottle of overpriced wine he probably bought with mom's money. He greeted everyone loudly, hugging relatives he barely knew, winking at neighbors like he was some charming benefactor. The smugness on his face almost made me lose focus, but I reminded myself, calm, steady, let the facts work. As people settled, I caught Judith's eye across the room. She gave a subtle nod it was time. Dinner started as expected. Small talk, laughter, stories about Dad. Then Lena raised her glass, ready to give her usual speech about how hard the year had been and how she was keeping the family together. I stood before she could finish, sliding the flash drive into the laptop connected to the projector. The first image appeared on the wall. A bank withdrawal slip for $20,000, Lena's signature scrawled at the bottom. The room went silent. I kept my voice even. This is money taken out against Mom's house, without her knowledge. Lena blinked, thrown off but recovering quickly. That's a family loan, you don't understand the details. I clicked again. A photo of her and Eric leaving the bank, time-stamped to the same day. A murmur spread through the room. This, I said, is what those details look like. Her smile cracked. Eric shifted in his chair, jaw tightening. I didn't stop. The next slide showed the LLC registration, their names side by side, no employees, no revenue. Then the casino receipts, the wire transfers, the offshore account numbers. Each click of the mouse was another nail. And with every nail, Lena's voice shrank. When I finally played the audio clip, Lena laughing about Mom ending up in a nursing home, the silence was suffocating. Even the neighbors, who'd been buying her stories for months, looked horrified. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she held my hand tight. Eric tried to bark back. This doesn't prove anything. Anyone can make fake recordings. Judith stood then, calm as stone. Certified copies, chain of custody intact, and admissible in court. The room turned on him instantly. People he'd been charming for years now stared at him, like the fraud he was. I looked straight at Lena. You've been telling everyone I'm trying to take Mom's freedom. The truth is, you've been stripping it from her every day, one signature at a time. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, Lena had no script. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. All the chatter, all the laughter that had filled the house minutes earlier was gone. Eyes darted between the projector screen, Lena's frozen smile, and Eric's clenched jaw. I let the silence sit before speaking again. This isn't a misunderstanding. It isn't a family loan. It's theft. It's manipulation. And it's abuse. Lena shot up from her chair, her wine glass trembling in her hand. How dare you humiliate me like this in front of everyone? You think you're some kind of hero because you wear a uniform? You don't even live here. You have no idea what it takes to keep this family running. Her voice cracked halfway through, the mask slipping. A few cousins flinched at the outburst. Mom just stared at her, tears still wet on her cheeks. I didn't raise my voice. Keeping a family running doesn't involve wiring money to casinos or plotting nursing homes for your own mother. Eric slammed his palm against the table. This is slander? None of this would hold up in court. Judith, seated calmly near the end of the table, leaned forward. On the contrary, it already does. Certified documents, video surveillance, audio recordings. It's airtight. If you'd like to test it in court, I'll be filing tomorrow morning." A murmur rippled through the room. The neighbors whispered to each other. Some of the cousins nodded quietly, as if puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. Lena tried one last angle. She dropped into a chair and covered her face with her hands, shaking her shoulders in mock sobs. "All I ever did was try to help. Tessa has always hated me, and now she's destroying me in front of my family." Mom's voice, soft but firm, cut through the performance. "Stop it, Lena." Everyone turned to her. She wiped her eyes and looked directly at her oldest daughter. "I believed you. For years I believed every word. But no more." Lena's sobs stalled instantly. She peeked through her fingers, shocked that Mom hadn't played along. I pressed the point. "This isn't about me versus you. This is about Mom's safety, her home, her dignity. And you threw all of that away for greed." Eric stood, knocking his chair back, trying to redirect. "This family doesn't understand business. You're all stuck in the past. We were building something bigger than this crumbling house." Judith clicked the projector once more. The screen filled with the video of Eric sliding cash across a table at the strip mall office. The timestamp matched a withdrawal from the HELOC. Gasps filled the room. "This," Judith said sharply, "is money stolen from Ellen Monroe's home equity being laundered through a shell operation. You can call it business if you want. The law calls it fraud." Eric's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped closer to the table, my boots echoing on the hardwood. "For months, you both tried to paint me as paranoid, jealous, controlling. You spread lies to our family, to our neighbors, even to Mom. But here's the truth. You abused a legal document, you drained bank accounts, and you gambled away our father's legacy, and now everyone can see it." The projector light flickered across Lena's face, highlighting the panic that no amount of fake tears could hide. Cousin Jenny finally spoke up. "Lena, you told us Tessa wanted to force Aunt Ellen into a nursing home. But that was you." Her voice broke, but she didn't look away. "You lied to all of us." Lena sputtered. "You don't understand." "No," Jenny cut her off. "We understand perfectly now." The shift in the room was palpable. People who had walked in ready to believe Lena were now leaning away from her, their sympathy gone. Eric tried one last desperate move. He pointed at me, voice shaking. "She set us up. The army trained her to do this. Surveillance, spying, manipulation, it's second nature for her." That almost made me laugh. The army trained me to protect people, to stand up to bullies, and tonight, that training finally came in handy. The crowd wasn't buying his excuses. Neighbors whispered words like disgusting and criminal. Even Mark, who had seemed doubtful before, stood and shook his head at Lena. "Dad trusted you with this house. You dishonored all of it. I calls it." The weight of the truth finally cracked the performance. Lena dropped her act completely, rage twisting her face. She jabbed a finger at me. "You think you've won? You think this makes you better? You'll regret this, Tessa. You don't know what you've started." I didn't flinch. "What I started was stopping you." The room fell quiet again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't shock, it was clarity. Mom rose slowly from her chair, gripping the table for balance. She looked first at me, then at Lena. Her voice was steady. "I want the power of attorney revoked. Effective immediately." Judith nodded. "That can be arranged, Mrs. Monroe." Lena's eyes went wide. For the first time, she realized she'd lost control completely. I placed the flash drive back in my pocket and shut the laptop. The evidence had done its job. For years, Lena had controlled the narrative. But tonight, the story belonged to the truth. The fallout began almost immediately after that dinner. Once the projector went dark and people began filing out of the house, whispers turned into phone calls, and phone calls turned into formal complaints. Neighbors who had once smiled politely at Lena now avoided her altogether. Cousins who used to parrot her stories started texting me, apologizing for believing her. The lies collapsed faster than I expected. Judith wasted no time. The next morning, she filed the petition to revoke the power of attorney in county court. She included every piece of evidence: the HELOC withdrawals, the Shell LLC, the casino receipts, the recordings, even Eric's shady past. APS backed the petition with their own report, documenting Mom's vulnerability and Lena's exploitation. The case was airtight. When the sheriff's office delivered the notice, Lena threw a fit so loud the entire block probably heard it. She stormed into Mom's house, demanding to know how I could betray her like that. Mom, to her credit, didn't back down. She looked her oldest daughter in the eye and said, "You betrayed yourself." Eric tried to play tough in the days that followed. He called me one evening, voice low and threatening. "You think you can bury me with paperwork? I've been through worse. Judges don't scare me." I didn't bother raising my voice. "It's not the judge you should be worried about. It's the bank. It's APS. It's fraud investigators who live for cases like this. They don't care about family drama, they care about prison sentences." He hung up without another word. The bank moved quickly once the petition landed. They froze the HELOC account, cut off access, and launched their own review. I met with the branch manager in person, a man who had once believed Lena's polished act. His tone was different, now cautious, almost embarrassed. "We should have caught this earlier," he admitted. "The withdrawals, the shell company, it's a clear abuse of POA." They flagged Lena and Eric with the bank's fraud division, which meant no more easy loans, no more fast withdrawals, and a long uphill climb if they ever tried again. The county court hearing was scheduled within 2 weeks. It wasn't a drawn-out trial, but the room still filled with tension. Lena showed up in a blazer 2 sizes too small, trying to look respectable. Eric trailed behind her, avoiding eye contact. On our side, Judith sat poised with her folders. APS had their investigator ready, and Whitaker had quietly shown up in uniform, a silent reminder of credibility. The judge reviewed the evidence carefully, his brow furrowing deeper with each document. Lena tried her usual theatrics, crying about being misunderstood, about how she was just helping her mother. The judge cut her off mid-sentence. "Helping does not involve gambling away a senior citizen's home equity," he said flatly. Eric leaned forward, attempting to interrupt, but Judith slid the restraining order from his past across the table. The judge's eyes narrowed. "You failed to disclose this history while involving yourself in financial decisions for this family. That is a serious omission." In less than 30 minutes, the decision was made. The power of attorney was revoked, effective immediately. Mom's financial control was placed under temporary guardianship until a proper trust could be established, with oversight to prevent further abuse. The gavel hit, and Lena's face drained of color. She hissed at me as we stood to leave. "You think this is over? You just ruined your own family." I didn't even break stride. "No, Lena, I saved it." After the hearing, APS delivered a protective order for Mom, preventing Lena from pressuring her into signing anything. That meant no more surprise documents at the kitchen table, no more ambushes with a pen in hand. For the first time in months, Mom could exhale without Lena hovering over her shoulder. But Eric wasn't done trying to wriggle out. Within days, investigators traced more of the HELOC funds into his personal accounts. That tipped it into criminal territory. White-collar crimes don't move fast, but when they move, they're relentless. The district attorney's office opened an inquiry, and Eric was suddenly facing more than angry relatives, he was facing charges. Neighbors who had once waved at him now crossed the street to avoid him. The smug grin he wore everywhere was gone. He started parking his car 2 blocks away, probably to dodge process servers. Meanwhile, Lena unraveled. Without control of Mom's finances, she lost her leverage. The community she'd cultivated with gossip and fake concern evaporated overnight. Church friends stopped returning her calls. Relatives stopped inviting her to dinners. She went from self-appointed matriarch to outcast in record time. Mom, though shaken, grew stronger with each passing week. I helped her set up a living trust, splitting authority between me and a neutral third-party trustee to keep everything transparent. We froze her credit, closed unnecessary accounts, and added extra verification steps for every transaction. She told me one evening, with tears in her eyes, "I finally feel safe again." I realized that safety was more valuable than any dollar amount. Eric's downfall accelerated when the DA's office subpoenaed casino records. Surveillance footage matched Samir's photos. Eric cashing out chips hours after withdrawals from Mom's Hello. The charges stacked quickly. Fraud, elder exploitation, attempted wire fraud. The man who thought he was untouchable now faced the very real possibility of prison time. Lena tried to distance herself, painting Eric as the mastermind. But the paper trail didn't lie. Her signatures were everywhere. Even if she avoided prison, she couldn't avoid the permanent stain of being recorded in APS's files as an abuser. That alone was enough to strip her of any legal authority over Mom or anyone else ever again. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, Lena and Eric worked tirelessly to destroy my credibility, whispering that I was unstable, dangerous, controlling. In the end, their own actions screamed louder than any lie they spread. One quiet evening, I sat on the porch with Mom, the sun setting over the house Dad built. She looked at me and asked, "Did I raise you girls so differently?" I thought about it before answering. "You raised us both with love, but choices shape people more than upbringing. And Lena chose wrong." Mom sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I just wish I'd seen it sooner." I placed my hand over hers. "You trusted her. That's not a flaw, Mom. That's kindness. She's the one who turned it into a weapon." The legal battles weren't completely over. Eric still had arraignments ahead, and Lena had to deal with the financial mess she'd helped create, but for the first time, the tide had turned fully in our favor. The house was safe. Mom was protected. The power Lena once wielded had been ripped away, replaced by accountability she couldn't dodge. For years, she had used shame and manipulation to silence me. Now, the truth had spoken louder than she ever could. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee the morning Eric's arraignment hit the docket. I sat behind Mom, hands steady on her shoulders as we waited for the judge to enter. Lena showed up too, though she kept her distance, pretending she was there, just to support her boyfriend. The irony was thick, supporting him while he was charged with elder financial abuse, bank fraud, and wire fraud. The prosecutor didn't waste time. They laid out a timeline of withdrawals, matched with casino cash-outs and Eric's bank deposits. Screens lit up with footage of him at slot machines, stuffing cash into machines and cashing out minutes later. Then came Samir's photos, time-stamped, showing Lena with him at the bank the same morning of one of the largest withdrawals. Eric tried to look smug, but the sweat beating at his temples betrayed him. His attorney stammered through a plea for leniency, claiming Eric never intended to harm anyone. The judge raised an eyebrow. $120,000 says otherwise. Bail was set high enough that Eric wouldn't be walking free on pocket change. The gavel cracked, and Eric's expression shifted from arrogance to panic. Outside the courthouse, reporters circled like hawks. One shoved a mic toward me, asking how it felt to watch my own sister's partner face charges. I answered plainly, "Justice doesn't care about titles or relationships. It cares about actions." The clip aired on the evening news, and for once the community saw Lena not as the victim she pretended to be, but as the accomplice she really was. Protective orders followed swiftly. Lena was barred from contacting Mom without legal counsel present. The document spelled out every restriction: no texts, no surprise visits, no asking, just to borrow something. She was furious, pacing in front of the courthouse like a caged animal. She screamed at me, "You poisoned everyone against me." I didn't raise my voice. "You did that yourself." The weeks that followed felt like the quiet after a storm. APS closed their investigation, labeling the case substantiated elder abuse. That phrase alone carried weight. It meant Lena's name was now in state records, flagged permanently. No chance of ever becoming a guardian for anyone. No chance of running her manipulative routines again with the blessing of legal authority. Eric's world collapsed even faster. His employer, a construction subcontractor in Phoenix, fired him the moment the DA's charges became public. Word spread quickly, and his reputation tanked. He went from boasting at neighborhood barbecues about business ventures to being a cautionary tale whispered in coffee shops. The sheriff's office even found forged documents tied to his LLC. He had tried to falsify invoices to justify the missing HELOC money. That added forgery charges to his pile, and suddenly his "I've been through worse" bravado looked laughable. Meanwhile, Lena scrambled to reinvent herself. She tried to gather sympathy at church, painting herself as the sister caught in the middle of a vendetta. But parishioners weren't buying it. Too many had seen her explode at me in public, too many knew about the protective order, and too many had watched the evening news coverage. She was no longer a queen bee, she was radioactive. I'll admit, part of me expected her to double down, to launch smear campaigns or cook up wild accusations. but she didn't have the resources anymore. Her credibility was shot, her access to Mom's accounts was gone, and Eric was too busy fighting to stay out of prison to help her stage new schemes. The most surreal moment came during a follow-up meeting with Judith. She leaned back in her office chair, tapping a file. "You know, Tessa, this is the kind of case law professors love. Family, fraud, betrayal, military service, elder abuse, it's textbook." She smirked. "You've got yourself a perfect storm." I thought about that as I walked out of her office. She was right. This wasn't just about saving money or property, it was about dismantling a system of lies built on family ties. Mom's relief was visible in her daily life. She no longer jumped when the phone rang, no longer whispered in case Lena overheard. She baked again, humming as she worked in the kitchen. She even pulled out Dad's old vinyl records, filling the house with music that had been silent for years. Watching her reclaim her peace was the biggest victory of all. Still, justice had to be thorough. The DA eventually offered Eric a plea deal, 5 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 3, plus restitution payments. He took it, probably realizing the alternative meant a decade or more. Lena wasn't charged criminally, but she was named repeatedly in testimony. Her signature on withdrawal forms, her presence in surveillance footage, her hand in creating the LLC, all of it lived forever in court records. The final reckoning came during a civil suit hearing. Judith pushed for restitution, demanding repayment of stolen funds. The court ordered Eric and Lena jointly liable for over $80,000, though everyone knew collecting it would be like squeezing blood from a stone. Still, the judgment was symbolic. A legal stamp branding them both responsible. That night, as I locked up Mom's house, Lena appeared in the driveway. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders hunched, eyes hollow. She spat venom through clenched teeth. "You'll regret this. One day, you'll see what it feels like to have nothing." I didn't flinch. "I've already seen it, Lena. You created it for Mom, and I'll never let you do it again." She didn't answer. She just stood there until the sheriff's deputy accompanying me reminded her about the protective order. She backed away slowly, muttering under her breath, and disappeared into Eric's old truck. Walking inside, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, tea in hand. She looked up and said, "You did it, Tessa. You saved us." I sat down across from her, suddenly feeling the weight of months of battles catch up to me. "No, Mom, we saved ourselves. Together." The legal side was almost over, but the real victory was deeper. Lena no longer had power. Eric no longer had access. The lies no longer had control. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Mom slid a plate of pancakes across the table. She hadn't made breakfast like that in years, not since Lena had taken over the house with her endless lists of what was acceptable. Now there was no one hovering to criticize, no one snapping about calories or appearances. Just the smell of butter and maple syrup, the kind of peace we hadn't known in far too long. We spent the next weeks finalizing the living trust. Judith connected us with a trustee firm that handled veterans' families. Everything was set up to be transparent, with clear rules about withdrawals, bills, and healthcare expenses. Mom insisted I co-manage, but with oversight in place so neither of us felt burdened. "I don't want you to ever feel trapped the way I did with Lena," she told me. I nodded, realizing she wasn't just protecting her future, she was protecting mine too. With the finances secured, we turned to the simple things that made life worth living. We redecorated Mom's house, stripping out Lena's sterile touches. The heavy curtains she had insisted on were replaced with light ones that let in the Sunday. The gaudy wall art she'd bragged about finding at auctions went straight to Goodwill. In its place, we hung Dad's old photographs, landscapes from family road trips, portraits of us as kids with crooked smiles. For the first time in years, the house actually looked like home again. I took leave from the Army to be around during this transition. The military had always been a core part of who I was, and I'd never wavered in that duty. But being here for Mom, shoulder to shoulder through the fallout, felt just as important. Whitaker checked in occasionally, reminding me that integrity didn't only belong in uniform, it was how we carried ourselves everywhere. His words stuck with me. Mom began opening up more about the hurt Lena had caused. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she admitted, "I kept hoping she'd change, that maybe if I gave her enough, she'd finally see me as more than a wallet." Her voice cracked. But I realize now that no amount of love can fix someone determined to betray you. I held her hand and answered, "You don't owe her excuses. She chose greed over family. That's on her." It wasn't just mom healing. I found myself confronting the years of humiliation Lena had piled on me, every cutting remark, every attempt to paint me as controlling or cold. For so long, I let her words gnaw at me. But after watching her unravel, I finally understood. Projection had been her weapon. She accused others of the very things she was guilty of. Realizing that lifted a weight I hadn't even known I was still carrying. Neighbors started coming by again, not with pity but with respect. They brought casseroles, asked how mom was doing, and stayed to chat on the porch. One even said, "Tessa, you showed all of us what it looks like to stand up to family without tearing yourself down." That meant more than I expected. It was validation that the ugliness Lena had spread hadn't stuck to me. The Army community also rallied. Some of my unit members visited, offering to fix things around the house, install better locks, even check on mom while I was away. It reminded me that family wasn't just blood, it was also the people who showed up when it mattered. As months passed, Lena drifted out of the picture. Word spread that she'd moved to another state, trying to start over where fewer people knew her record. The APS entry followed her, though, and her reputation was beyond repair. She became a ghost of her own making. Eric, meanwhile, reported to prison, where orange jumpsuits replaced tailored jackets. The thought of him behind bars didn't spark joy, exactly, but it felt like balance had been restored. 1 year later, we marked Dad's anniversary with a family gathering. This time, the air wasn't tense. Relatives who had once believed Lena's stories came with open apologies. Aunts who had accused me of being too harsh now hugged me tightly. Even cousins who had stayed silent admitted, "We should have spoken up sooner." I didn't dwell on the past. It was enough to see everyone sitting together in peace, the way family was supposed to be. At the center of the table sat a framed challenge coin I'd received when I pinned on Major. I placed it there deliberately, not to flaunt rank but to remind everyone what honor looked like. Military service had taught me that honor wasn't about medals or parades. It was about choosing truth when lies were easier, about protecting those who couldn't defend themselves, about standing steady even when it meant standing alone. During dinner, Mom raised her glass. Her voice was strong, free of the tremors that used to shadow her words. To family not the kind bound by papers or poisoned by greed, but the kind that fights for each other. Glasses clinked, and in that moment, it felt like we'd finally rebuilt what Lena had tried to destroy. After everyone left, I stayed behind with Mom to clean up. She smiled as she stacked plates and said, "I don't feel afraid anymore." I realized she meant more than just finances. She meant Lena's shadow no longer haunted her. Later that night, I stood alone in the backyard, staring up at the stars. I thought about the journey from humiliation in that restaurant to this quiet victory. It hadn't been easy. It had cost time, tears, and trust. But we had made it. We had turned betrayal into a lesson, chaos into structure, and shame into strength. And as I looked back into the warm glow of the house, Mom humming in the kitchen, the photographs on the walls, the challenge coin on the table, I knew we hadn't just survived Lena's schemes. We had built something stronger in their place. Looking back now, I realized that none of this was really about money. It wasn't about the HELOC, or the fraudulent LLC, or even Eric's casino nights. What it was truly about was respect. Respect for the people who raised you, for the sacrifices that built the foundation of your life. Lena lost that respect the moment she treated our mother like a burden instead of a blessing. And once you cross that line, once you decide greed matters more than family, it's only a matter of time before everything crumbles. For me, this battle was never optional. The Army trained me to face hard choices, but it was being my mother's daughter that made me step into that fight. Protecting her wasn't a duty I could walk away from. It was who I am. What surprised me most wasn't Lena's betrayal. Deep down, I'd seen the cracks forming for years. What surprised me was the strength Mom found once the truth came to light. She didn't just survive losing her oldest daughter to lies and manipulation, she stood taller because of it. Watching her rediscover her voice reminded me that resilience doesn't belong only to soldiers. It belongs to anyone who chooses truth over fear. The house feels lighter now. Not just because the locks are changed and the finances are secure, but because the weight of deception is gone. We eat together, laugh without tension, and plan for the future without dread. If there's one thing I'll carry forward, it's this. Honor isn't a medal you pin on a uniform. It's the quiet decision, day after day, to defend what matters most. For me, that was my family. And though the scars of betrayal will never fully fade, neither will the proof that we overcame it with truth, with strength, and with the kind of love no scam can ever steal.